Okay, alright.
Hello and welcome back to the Make Lemonade podcast, the show brought to you by Lemon Squeezy as we hope to inspire you to earn money from your own lemonade stand. I'm one of your co-host James and I'm back here with JR Farr, co-founder and CEO of Lemon Squeezy. Today we're joined by Rob Walling, who is a veteran entrepreneur with his most notable exit being Drip in 2016. Rob also founded MicroConf, started TinySeed and is the host of the Startups for the Rest of Us podcast, which has over 690 episodes, having started it back in 2010. But it doesn't stop there for Rob. He's also written 4 books: Start Small, Stay Small, Start Marketing the Day You Start Coding, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Keeping Your Shit Together, and most recently, the SaaS Playbook. In this episode, we discuss a myriad of topics in bootstrapping and business, including life after exits, why Rob feels compelled to write books, his most successful angel investment to date, and if he would invest in Lemon Squeezy today. Let's get into it.
Okay, alright.
What are your 2 roles? Like, does James pay? Does James have ownership? Or, what's the deal? If you don't mind me asking. If you don't mind jumping to the chase.
Bada bing, bada boom. Yeah, no. I mean, my role is co-founder and I guess obviously CEO of Lemon Squeezy, but yeah, we just really wanted to lean into getting connected to the audience. And so I started the podcast. I was doing it kind of by myself. And I just don't have the amazing voice that James has. And James, I can't even remember how we connected, but I think he was actually using Lemon Squeezy. And then I asked him to edit a few, and then I was like, why don't you just come co-host this thing? Yeah. So that's kind of how it came together. What I was saying to him, Rob, that's helped me is I'm at a point, and I don't know, I'm sure you've experienced this too, where I'm kind of just stuck in the non-sexy, boring admin minutia of business, right? That you have to kind of take care of. And for me, my creativity kind of gets squashed, right? I really have a hard time like pulling myself back up into 30,000 feet, thinking high level, and this almost selfishly kind of gives me that where I can kind of reset and think about what I'm doing, what I need to work on, and 100%. Stuff like that.
I've absolutely been there. That's why I started blogging.
Yeah.
That's why I write books. That's why I do a podcast and YouTube because the creativity. Yeah, grinding, being the operator is like needs to get done. But that's not the fun job. I mean, the first topic James threw out was like, Rob's not doing any more SaaS. Why? Why? And then but he wrote a book and it's like, that's why I'm not doing it. Because it's just not that fun. Like that, It's fun for some people and parts of it are fun. I like the making, right? Talk about the creativity, like building the product or building the org and this and that. But the day-to-day of it is like very unsexy to use the term you used.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I have no ownership. JR just pays me per episode to do this. We've sort of agreed a set amount of episodes for the next few months, and we'll sort of see where it goes.
Cool.
But
that's fun. Sorry to jump into that and ask such a blunt question. I'm a podcaster too, though, so I learned to ask people with a straight face. So, what is your MRR? People are like, that feels awkward, but it's like you got to do it.
I like it.
Are we going to talk about the Gumroad price increase and how I felt like I did like a tweet thread that's probably my most popular thread ever about just how messed up their Gumroad increase, the price increase was communicated. And then everyone was responding like, I'm going to Lemon Squeezy. Yeah, Lemon Squeezy. Yeah, and that was the first time I'd heard of you actually, which was
right.
12, 18 months. So I'm curious at some point if we have time to hear from
Absolutely.
JR's perspective about what that experience was like.
Oh, absolutely.
What else do you want to know or hear or ask us, Rob?
Well, so JR, off or on the record, right? If I ask you stuff, you can obviously edit it out. But give me what's the context of Lemon Squeezy in terms of some scale, whether you want to do revenue or just team size. And I am curious to hear about your funding status.
So earlier this year, was in Silicon Valley. We were getting all the brand names for inbound interest for Series A. I flew out to San Francisco, did all the big names, A16Z, Sequoia XL, whatever. Got term sheets. It was interesting. I've always intentionally wanted to be bootstrapped. That's where I come from. Mm-hmm. So we got the term sheets. We declined them. We decided to stay independent. So we are still independent. And it doesn't mean we can't raise if we want to down the road, but I really don't want to right now. I like the kind of the path we're on. We're not necessarily like the subscription base. We're more of the Stripe model, right? But a lot of our volume is subscription based, so we can predict a lot of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the team size, we're just about to pass 20. We could probably hire a lot more, but I have this big thing of hire when it hurts and try to, small team, high impact. I feel like bureaucracy creeps in, things like that. So that's like the high level of who we are, what we do. But yeah, I mean, I'm at the point where, trying to just ignite us into that 8-figure mark, where you're getting in the 10s and 20s and, you have to kind of change some of the business to kind of get there. So,
Yep. So I sold, just FYI, we were in the millions in revenue, but not 8 figures. And then I left when we were in the 10, I believe 10. Yeah, we were tens of millions in revenue when I left about 20 months later. So that gives you, so I was there for that transition, but I didn't have to make it. Like, I'm not a COO of a company that big. I operated it to about 10 people and then sold, became VP product. And I ran then the engineering and product team up to about 20 engineers and product people. And then I just wasn't having fun at all. Because I'm a builder and a maker and a creator, probably similar to you. And so that was when I took my leave. And so that gives you an idea.
I remember watching that product come to life. I was a big fan of it. So Rob, my thing was before Lemon Squeezy, I had Mojo Marketplace, which was like the WordPress thing when WordPress was coming up, like 2009, right? And so we rode this audience and did the same thing you did, got it to millions, sold it. And then I stayed on for 6 years. I got it to tens of millions as a CEO, and then we were part of a bigger company. We IPO'd, stuff like that. But what I find interesting about Drip, at least from my perspective, was did you ride the Shopify wave to get where you got? Is that what you found? Or was there something early on that you caught and then you went into Shopify?
Shopify was basically as I was leaving. So Drip started, first line of code, December 2012, launched in a year later. And then we sold it within 2.5 years of launching. And so we grew very fast, obviously. The wave we caught was there was MailChimp, Aweber, and a bunch of email service providers or email marketing platforms, whatever you call them. And no automation, no tagging, everything's in lists. It was very siloed. It was 15-year-old tech and 15-year-old paradigms. Then there was this marketing automation stuff that was Marketo, Silverpop. This is before HubSpot was just getting into it. Infusionsoft, now they're called Keep, I believe. They were all enterprise sales, really shitty sales process, demo, couldn't see the product till you signed up, paid $2,000, signed an annual contract. So now, and it's like people hated that. And they were $500 a month and up, I think was it, meaning like $6,000 a year plus so like the minimum buy-in on that was $6,000 or $8,000, but that was the only way to get automations. And I didn't realize this when we were building Drip. Drip was just an email capture widget and sequences, like autoresponder sequences. And then we got about 6 months in and people were like, oh, are you going to add automations? And I was like, what are automations? And it was smart people that like Drew Sanaki, I don't know if you know him from ecom stuff, Brennan Dunn, saying like, oh, there's this thing, look at Infusionsoft. And I was like, oh, maybe we should go there because I think we could be about half or a fifth of the price and still mint money because they had artificially kept the prices high. It didn't need to be that expensive. That's the wave we rode. And so it was our early focus. What's a trip is we focused on like bloggers, info marketers, course sellers, SaaS, and like a lot of software WordPress people, because that was my audience, right, from the podcast and such. But we actually, when we sold, I hadn't really looked into it, but about 15% of our customers were ecom. We had never marketed to ecom. I had no reach into ecom. And for some reason, we had a bunch of ecom. And that was where the new owners started looking and saying, oh, there's a lot of opportunity here. Klaviyo, however you pronounce it, they were, they're public now, right? I think they went public in the last few months. They were still an upstart. They were ahead. I mean, if I were to guess at that point, they were doing tens of millions in revenue and they'd raised a bunch of money.
I remember.
But they were not a shoe-in for this thing. It was still an open field. And that's where the new owners, I was there and I was part of this process. I was saying, let's niche down a little bit to like people who sell things online. So get rid of bloggers are high churn. They're kind of a pain in the ass. There's a bunch of stuff, but anybody who sells anything. So courses and SaaS and ecom and blah, and they wanted to niche down even further. And once they said ecom, which is what you saw, that they went all in on Shopify. And that was when I took my leave because I was just like, I don't have anything to offer here. Like, I don't know ecom. I don't really care about ecom. And there's no reason I should be running product at an ecom company.
Interesting. Cool. Love that story. It was fun to watch.
Thank you. It was excruciating to live.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah.
You know, not every day. It was obviously a lot of fun. I used to tell my team that we'd go out to lunch and I'm like, these are the good old days. It's like 5-6 of us around a table. It's like, please remember how fucking awesome these days are. Because you were, and I still remember these forever. We get back with the early team, the pre-acquisition team, and we reminisce about those days.
Absolutely.
Do you feel that same way about Mojo, JR? Was it excruciating? Post-acquisition?
Everything he's saying, I'm just kind of doing this.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's right. Like the first 5 or 10 people and before, it's just every day's a new day, and you're kind of just rolling your sleeves up, and everyone's just kind of got a bunch of hats on, and especially when you found that drinking out of a fire hydrant growth where you found something, and you're not having to work so hard. You're working hard on the things that, because of the scale and the how fast you're going. That's where it's really, really fun, and that's rare for sure.
It is, and that's why when people say, "What's product market fit?" I say, "You'll know it when you see it." Right? It's like
it smacks you right in the face.
You don't actually need to send Sean Ellis's famous thing. How disappointed would you be if you couldn't use it? And it's 40% or more. You didn't need that at all, because it's like all the graphs are going in the right direction at a certain point.
Rob, I don't know if you know JR's backstory with founding Mojo, which is arguably one of the largest WordPress marketplaces. And when I spoke to JR about like regretting this, or was it a good decision for you? We've also done an episode about mental health, which sort of came after this acquisition. And JR's response was, it was because I was young and naive, I guess, was your response. Is that about right, JR? And like, given how WordPress has grown since he sold back in 2014?
2013, yeah.
Like, seeing the growth of that, I'm like, do you regret? He's like, yeah, I probably could have kept him going.
But it's always coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? Like, it could have gone the other way. So, it is what it is.
Do you ever have that feeling with Drip, Rob?
No, I was ready to go. There's so many reasons for that. Like, the stock market was up and down. It dropped. SaaS valuations were cut in half. Public SaaS valuations were 7x ARR. And then in January of 2016, which was about 5 months before we sold, we were halfway through. It was a 13-month process. We were halfway through, like, talking about, they got cut in half to 3.5x. And suddenly it was like, well, we're going to make you an offer now, 3.5x. And I was like, fuck no, there is no chance, no reality where I sell for that, and to their credit, we worked it out, obviously, and made it work. I thought about selling for well over a year, so I had plenty of time to think about it. I knew the company would continue to grow, but what I didn't know is, we had Russian hackers, we had all of our IPs blacklisted at one point for reasons, and I was like, well, we had a good run. I guess this millions of dollars, many millions in net worth that I've tied up in this company, I guess that went to zero today. Like, I literally had days where I woke up, and I'm a little bit of a catastrophizer, but it just got old. I think these days, maybe if I could do it again, I would sell partial equity.
Okay.
But it didn't exist. That didn't exist then. And in any meaningful format for a, few $1 million SaaS company. So do I have regrets? No. And of course, Drip is, 10, 20x the size when we sold, but it's like, but I didn't want to keep doing that. And the millions in my bank account made me feel really relaxed. Yeah.
And there's 10, 20 times the problems too, probably, right?
Yeah,
to get there.
There is.
Yeah, you're right.
We would have had to raise money, or we wouldn't have been able to scale the way we did. We needed to hire, from 3 engineers when I sold to almost like 17, 18 within less than 2 years. And I couldn't have hired that many with the revenue, but we needed that to scale. So to your point, JR, it's just at a certain point, you have to make this decision. Do I raise funding, which I didn't particularly want to do, or do I sell and take cash into my bank account and walk away and ride off into the sunset, So that was the decision I had. And now I am honestly like living my best life, I think. Like, this is the happiest I've ever been in my career in terms of MicroConf and TinySeed and my podcast. It's like, I just get to do this stuff I've been doing kind of for free for like 13 years. I get to now do that as a job. Yeah. So like, why would I have regrets about that,
Hell yeah, Rob. You just unlocked the secret to life. When you can find that, that's awesome. So good for you.
Thank you.
Love that.
How do you split your time and your day between all of those things?
Well, so what's interesting is I've started, I think 6 companies. I actually need to write them down. 6 or 7, but I think six companies, 5 of them bootstrapped. I think that's the line that I use. The one that's not bootstrapped is TinySeed, right? Because it's an accelerator. It's a venture fund. So we've raised $42 million of venture funding, and then we get management fees off that to pay, and we break even on the management fees. You spend them all, right, to run the accelerator. The nice part is that MicroConf and TinySeed both have kind of, I'll say senior leadership. Like we effectively, producer Xander with MicroConf he runs it. He's effectively the CEO. So I do a 1 hour call with him every week. And then we're in Slack. So like and I show up at the events. I'm the face of it. I record 52 YouTube videos a year. I record 52 podcasts a year. But like, and I minimize that. That's a lot of work, but I don't operate. I don't operate. I'll interview. The team is about 6 people, right? So when we hire, I'll do some interviews, but it's like, I'm not in day-to-day operations. Similar with TinySeed. I am a face of it. I'm an advisor to the founders. I am in Slack. I do the retreats, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot more travel than anything. But I only do, scheduled calls on my calendar in a week. I have 3 1 hour calls. And one is with Xander. One is with TinySeed, everybody, the senior leadership at TinySeed plus Xander. So we can share info across the companies. And the third is with our content producer because I have YouTube videos and podcasts to produce, so that's it. So it's day to day. It's like I'm in email and Slack a lot. That is my job. My job is reactive. Aside from producing, again, podcasts every week, some intros to the MicroConf podcast, and a YouTube video from scratch. Biggest part of my job is getting back to founders, giving them advice, booking calls. I do have office hours every week, right? Those sometimes get booked and sometimes don't. So those are recurring, but they're not always fully booked. So I actually work less now than I ever did running Drip. And that's how I want it to be. When I left Drip, I said, I don't ever want to work like that again. And I only worked like 40-ish hours at Drip, 40 to 50 usually. But I was like, yeah, I'm ready to kind of ease up a little bit.
Hey, Rob, do you, is it just kind of every day you wake up and then you kind of attack your day? Or do you say like today's geared around MicroConf and today's geared around TinySeed or today's geared around pitches with founders? Like how do you... Is the week kind of change, just like go by the beat of your own drum kind of thing, or do you have it a little structured? Okay.
I don't have it structured. It's not like one day's MicroConf, one day's TinySeed, because all that stuff is, they're sister companies, and I create content for both, and I do stuff for both, and I just do it. I do what comes up. I have a Trello board for my to-dos. I have email that everybody hits me up on, and Slack that people hit me up on. And so nice. I work about equal time on MicroConf and TinySeed, I would say. And then the podcast is kind of on my own. Like I have a producer, but like today he's like, so we're on a call and he said, you realize you should have shipped an episode yesterday to the editor. And I was like, yeah, I'm a day behind. So like after this call or maybe tomorrow, I need to just record one, and it might be a solo or it might be an interview, but like I'm just floating out there. It's episode 694 or something I'm recording. So
crazy.
You just kind of do it.
Have you not got a backlog of episodes?
No. Of Startups for Rest of Us? No, the episode I have to record today or tomorrow goes live in 2 weeks.
Okay. So in that sense,
it's only 2 weeks.
It's up to date with whatever questions or the latest thing that's going on.
Yes.
But also,
I would like to get ahead.
Yeah.
But I've been traveling a lot, and sometimes it's just not possible.
Yeah. How did you fit in writing books to this schedule?
That's the thing is I can only do maybe one additional project at any given time.
Okay.
Just based on and a book is a project. So the only reason that I got this last book written, I sat down and I was like, I'm a writer. I've written 3 books, well, 2.5 because one was co-written with my wife. Yeah. SaaS Playbook. I'm going to sit down and grind it out. And I got to about 20,000 words, which is like 7,500 pages. And then I just writer's blocked for like 8 months. And eventually,
oh my gosh,
it was nuts. Yeah, I've never had that before. And I just couldn't get it out. And I realized that one of the biggest problems I was having was I had this whole table of contents and I was like, I've said all of everything I need to write. I've already said, and it was, and it's been on podcasts. It's been on YouTube. It's been in a blog post. Like it was killing me that I had to rehash it. So finally, it's actually very hard to find a writing coach / I'm going to use this phrase that I don't like using, but ghostwriter. It's hard to find a good one. I got an intro and I started working with her, and basically I said, this chapter is that YouTube video. This chapter is this piece of that podcast. She went out. I don't know if she transcribed it or listened. I don't know how she did it, but then she would turn it into prose. Like you read the book, it reads like it's not a transcript, right?
Yeah.
She would turn it into prose. So the second half of the book is all the stuff that I'd already said. The first half is a bunch of, and not exactly the first half, but half of the book is stuff that I wrote from scratch. And then I went through and put it in my voice because no one can get your voice perfectly right. So that's the only reason the book got finished was because I paid someone to basically do a bunch of the writing, that's the first time I've done it. I struggled with it. It's an ego thing for me, But then I realized, why does anyone care what words I use? They really want the concepts, and the concepts are all mine. Like, she didn't come up with these. It was, all my rules and my 80-20, my this and that. I realized at a certain point, if I'm going to ship this thing, I just have to bite the bullet.
How much did you have to pay for that?
A lot. For half the book, it was probably 10 grand. It was expensive. Full book would have been 20. So then while I was writing SaaS Playbook, I had another 30,000 words about this kind of a precursor. It's like idea to launch. And I was like, it doesn't belong in here. So I just put it in a Google Doc, and it's completely finished, copy edited. So I have a 150-page book that I think I'm just going to publish at some point, because it was kind of a byproduct. And then Sherry and I are actually working. My wife, Dr. Sherry Walling, who's a founder coach and psychologist, we're working on a book about the psychology of exits, of selling your company, thinking it through, all the pain. Because she, like, half her clients, she tells me, I don't know them, they're exiting, they're going public, they've sold, and now they're like wrecked because it's... and
I don't know if you dealt with this. Holy cow, that like just struck a nerve. But Rob, I don't know if you dealt with this, but mine was like, you wrap so much of your identity up in your business that you don't know who the fuck you are when you're done. And it wrecks you. It really does. That's like a great word. Like, that's amazing, actually. I had no idea that that's what your wife did.
Yep. It happens to most people who sell. And she came to me and said, we got to write a book about this. She's like, every founder I talk to, because everybody sells. Everybody sells. I never thought MailChimp was going to sell. They sold. I didn't think I was going to sell. I sold. Yeah. Like, it just happens. Someone offers you enough money, you never have to work again. Or in MailChimp's case, that no one in your family tree will ever have to work.
The next generation's going to work,
But so everybody sells, and it's super complicated. And there are good books, like John Borlow has a good book, and there's Finish Big, and there's this and that. But like Sherry especially, like, I have my perspective from my exit and from founders in TinySeed, but she has this like in-depth thinking through pros and cons, doing it well, preparing in advance, even archetypes of different, how exits impact different people and your personality and this and that. And like, I'm excited about it. All we have is a table of contents, and we've had people review it and give us feedback, but I'll be calling up my writer, and Sherry and I are going to probably record a bunch of our thoughts and then, get it going.
I'm so intrigued. I can't wait to see that.
People say that. They're like, this is a real need for this. And I'm like, good. Hopefully that's the market validation,
Yeah.
What's it like collaborating with your wife on a book? Because you did this before, right? With the Entrepreneur's Guide.
To keeping your shit together, yeah. We work very differently. It is, we've been together for almost 27 years, married for 24.
Wow.
And we love each other dearly and like each other too, which I think is unusual for people who've been together that long. But our work styles are so different. So it is challenging. I'm super structured. I used to be a developer, so I like structure everything. And I need bullets. I need the formatting to all be the same. Otherwise, it's like visual noise to me. Because, when you read code, it like has to be formatted. She's just all over the place. Fonts are different. Colors are different. No, you have to standard. Like, I literally couldn't read the outline. I was like, I have to reformat this. But she's the creative, poetic thinker.
Yeah.
And she comes up with the, like, SaaS Playbook is... I will say it's well written, it's compact, but it is, if there was any criticism of it, it's a bit dry. It's a reference book, it's like, here's how to do this, step. And that's what my part of the exit, book will be. Sherry brings this flourish to it that is more anecdotes, more stories, more of a human aspect to it. And so I think our collaborations are much better than stuff that I do individually.
Yeah. And why keep writing books? Because it's like a long, hard, stressful process, which like are sold for
$30 for the hardcover, I think 25. Yeah, the money we make. Sherry said, do you realize this is the worst dollars per hour we make in our career, like of either of us? And I'm like, I know, but I don't know, man. It's like, why record 692 episodes of a podcast that makes no money? Now it does these days because I sell sponsorship. We sell sponsorships, but the first 500 we had no sponsorships. Yeah. I would say because I have to. Because I can't not. Like, I blogged for 5 years, and I wrote 2 books worth of material. One, I gathered it up into an ebook people can download for free called Start Marketing the Day You Start Coding. And I was doing that for free because why do we do what we do? It's I think, like JR said, it's a creative outlet, and it's a way to synthesize things in a way. Books, I tell you what, 70,000 people on YouTube, whatever, 20, 30,000 subscribers of Startups for the Rest of Us. Like, the book gets me more, I'll say, notoriety, and people put it on their shelf and think about it, even though the amount of content is so much bigger on these other,
That's I was going to say, Rob, like, is it fair to say that it does bring some authority to Rob and what you do with TinySeed and what you do with, right? Like, that there is an element of that is, yeah.
That is a bonus. That there are several bonuses. That's one of them. Yeah. There's a feeling of satisfaction of shipping something into the world. That's a bonus. I get a dopamine rush when people write in, or when
legacy. Yeah.
All this stuff of like, I did the Kickstarter and it did well and that felt great. So it's like each of those, why do we do anything hard? And I think that's it's like, this is just something we do,
What do you do for fun? We spoke about this briefly on our pod, but I take my hobbies very seriously now. I don't try and turn them into anything that tries to make money. It's very important to me that I stop work at 5 p.m. and I go out and I just enjoy myself and do stuff because I need it.
So I'm going to answer and then I want to ask JR because I will admit when I was building Drip, I had no hobbies. It was family and work. We had 2 young kids at that point too. So it's family and work. I kind of wanted to have hobbies. I just had no headspace for it. Sold Drip, got back into all my old hobbies, and I love it. And so one of them is I play the acoustic guitar. Not that well, but Sherry and I used to be in a band 20 years ago in Sacramento, and so we do still sing and play. I love tabletop games, like whether it's Dungeons & Dragons or I have a bunch of solo games down here, one called Demon Ship and Desolate, a lot of solo games that I'll bring with me on travel, and I'll sit at a table and do a dungeon crawl, alone, which sounds very sad. It's actually quite fun. So I love tabletop games. I've always played them and loved them. And then the last thing is I like collecting like comic books and very unique pieces. So like this is a gold record, Abbey Road gold record presented to the Beatles. I got it at an auction like that. To me, I bought it. It is single-digit thousands of dollars. It's not that expensive, but it's like I bought it after the Drip exit. This was my Lamborghini. Yeah. You know how people buy crazy shit? I was like, dude, I'm a huge Beatles fan. And I was like, this symbolizes something to me that I did well, Yeah. So, and I have like expensive Silver Age comic books as well, first appearance of Spider-Man, that kind of stuff. So those are my 3. And with that, I want to pass it to JR because I'm curious. Again, when I was running a SaaS, I didn't have time for hobbies. So I'm curious if you have them or ever put them on hold or what.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll answer it like this. So the first go around, my first rodeo, I guess, I did what Rob said. And when I sold, we went through all that and then burned out and crashed and, it was not good. And so I've really tried this time to find some balance. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, like if you want to talk about Gumroad last Christmas, I mean, I did not take a day off except for Christmas Day. So I can definitely go to that gear if I need to, but I do really try. I actually picked up a guitar this year with my son. My brothers played it and I started doing that. I play hockey. So like, there's things like that I feel like I have to do. Otherwise I'm worried where I'll take myself. Does that make sense? Like, so,
absolutely.
So I kind of almost force myself to do it just to not be all business all the time.
That's what my wife, Dr. Sherry Walling, a psychologist and founder coach, would tell you. Get get enough sleep, work out, and have hobbies. So I didn't do any of those 3 things when I was running Drip, and I crashed pretty hard.
Exactly. I did it the first time. Yeah. And
So if you were both to give advice to someone who is in the thick of it with their startup, maybe they're growing really quickly and they're in fire hydrant mode, is it like step back, find time, do that stuff that keeps you healthy and sane? Like, what does it take because you both know when you're in it, it's so hard to pull yourself out and think about these things.
Yeah. Number 1, the business will not fall apart if you work 1 hour less today.
Yeah.
It will not. I convinced myself it would every day, and it was to my detriment mentally and physically. I laugh because it was not great. Number 2, hire an operations manager, director, whatever title you want to give them. If people ask me, what was your biggest mistake with running Drip? It's like, I did all the operations, and I actually I can do operations. I just don't like it. So why didn't I hire? Because I convinced myself we were bootstrapped, didn't have the money. Kept hiring engineers, kept hiring salespeople. That was a great choice because the product caught up, got moved fast. Sold, we grew quickly. But I didn't like my own job and I created my own job. So why didn't I put some money into hiring someone?
That's actually really good to hear you say that, Rob, the last part. I mean, yeah, everything Rob said, he's absolutely right. Obviously, if the business is set up where you can't take an hour away, then fundamentally you probably got something you need to change, right?
Yep.
So let's get that fixed. But I mean, just hearing you talk about the operations person, that is kind of where I'm getting, and it's overwhelming me. I mean, I'm literally eating sales tax and plan for breakfast every morning, and it's kind of getting old.
20 people
it's a very hearty meal.
Yeah, it's a little too late. Not too late. I'm sorry. It's never too late, but it is like, I think by 10, you should have somebody, unless you have real senior people who are managing themselves and there's like no background operations, it's much simpler business than we have. I think you got to start thinking at it between 10 and 15. That's what, there's TinySeed companies that's the advice I give them as well. Yeah. We hired I forget what her title is, director of operations at TinySeed, because there is a bunch of stuff that we don't want to do. My co-founder and I don't want to do. And she's full-time, and it's crazy the amount of, a fund is different too, right? Because you have 300 LPs and you have to do distributions, and none of those work out correct when a company sells, so you have to do a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of like moving bits around, but we ran a job search and just found her.
Can we talk about TinySeed? James, can we talk about TinySeed with him right now? I want to go into like how obviously you were founder and, you're exposed to it, but I mean, I'm sure you're learning a lot too about like just running an accelerator and things like that. I remember when it first came out, I think, I'm a big fan of Rand Fishkin. I thought he was involved in the early days, but maybe you guys just was he involved somehow?
He not like equity wise or anything, but he was an early advocate for us. He was invested pretty heavily in the first fund, and we adapted his terms for SparkToro as the TinySeed terms, which is an equity split with a revenue share, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And he's obviously got the scars to, to build that from the days at Moz. And yeah,
it's a more bootstrapper friendly model. Venture is just kind of weird. If you're going to mostly bootstrap a SaaS to an exit of 10, 20, 30 million, like you don't want to raise venture. It just doesn't make sense, And so, but SparkToro's model, you can do profit sharing if you want, or if you wind up exiting, it's just pretty simple. And we do a mix of equity. Sometimes we invest equity in equity, and sometimes we do safes. I mean, the mechanism isn't super important, but.
The last time I heard you said you're up to like, what was it, 130, 140 companies you've invested in? Is it still climbing?
151 now, yeah. And we'll do another, we do about 20 to 25 every 6 months. So we'll be, with our current funding, we should cross 200 by maybe spring of 25. I think that's when our last funding runs out. So we'll start fundraising next year. And then it's that, and then I have 20 investments of my own that I did before TinySeed. So it's a pretty big data set now, which is neat.
Which I think was Jason Cohen. He was on with us last week, right? You were in his Series A?
Yeah.
With Doug Pingen?
That's right. Yep. That was, oh man, talk about a story. I don't know if I've ever told this. I don't know if you want to hear it. But
go ahead. Yeah.
I would love to.
Okay.
I would love to.
So talk about, I have this phrase I say, doing things in public creates opportunity. This is a perfect example. You may have heard Luck Surface Area by Jason Roberts, but I was a blogger, 2005, blogging about solo software entrepreneurship. I didn't know. I'd heard Eric Sink blog about it. Joel Spolsky was a bootstrapper. I had never heard anyone else talk about this. And so I was blogging, and with not that many readers. And then by 2008-9, I had 10,000, 20,000 RSS subscribers, right? Which is worth nothing these days. But wrote a book, Start Small, Stay Small. And as the purchases started coming through, I was like, wait, I recognize these names. So like someone bought like Peldi Gilzoni, who at the time had just started Balsamic, and Patrick McKenzie, who is now Patio 11 on the internet, but he was just a dude with a bingo card creator. Like we were all just these kids. And I invited both of them to speak at the very first MicroConf because that was how I got to know him. And then I saw something come through with Jason Cohen. And again, no one knew who that name was, but I read his blog. And I was like, oh, he's reading my blog. Well, of course, there were like 6 of us. It was a completely, nascent space. So I wrote Start Small, Stay Small. He read it and he told me, this is a really good book. Do you want to like promote it on my blog, A Smart Pair? So we published a whole chapter. It was like the VA chapter about hiring VAs, virtual assistants, back when that was a novel thing. Mm-hmm. And then he had exited, and I had a lot of admiration for his writing. And I was like, this guy's a baller. And he gets in touch and he says, I'm starting a new company. It's called WordPress. It's a WordPress host. I don't know if he had a name yet. And this email comes through with a link to click to like see a deck. And I click through and it's a 404. And I'm like, what's the min? Because I don't even need to see the deck, honestly. I didn't care. It was like this dude starting this thing. So he said, I was not accredited at the time, right? So I was like, can you do friends and family, ? And he's like, yeah, and our min's 25K. This was like a pre-seed round or whatever. Min's 25K, put in whatever you can. So I go to my wife and I'm like, we don't have the money. I don't have any money. And so I'm like looking for like in the couch corner. So I come up with 20K. That really it was a lot of money for us. But I was like, I have to do this. So we put 20K in, and then a year or two later, it came around again. And I think you could do some pro rata of 2.5x your number, which would have been 50. And I didn't have 50K. So again, I still not accredited. And we put in like 35K then. That exited in 2018, and we paid cash for our very nice house in Minneapolis next to a lake. It was like, it was the first angel investment I ever did. And aside from selling drip and getting lucky with crypto, it is the most money I've ever made on any investment. So awesome. It was a great story. And the reason he got in touch with me, why did he get in touch with this nobody? I was nobody. But he had read my blog, and he said, you can help me with email stuff and virtual assistants. And at some point, I will call on you. It was like the Godfather. At some point, I will call on you. Help us out when that happens. And I said, great, because it was a closed round. It's like, it was like Eric Ries and this luminaries, and also Rob Walling at the end. I was just, not known. So
Love it.
Yeah, it was a little getting lucky, but a little putting in some work too, to get.
And it ties back to what we just said about like why write the book. Well, yeah, there you go. I mean, he bought your book, and.
Yeah, holy shit! I didn't know that you were like scratching around to find the money to put into it. That's a risk.
It was scary. I'm like pretty risk averse because I'm like a bootstrapper and this and that, but I'm less risk averse than some people. And I definitely had to convince like my wife Sherry. Well, we grew up like she grew up on food stamps. I grew up not on food stamps, but my dad was an electrician. Mom didn't work, so we drink powdered milk a lot. Blah blah blah. I don't want to act like a politician that I came from, but we didn't have money growing up. So to say I'm going to write a check for 20 grand to some company that doesn't really exist yet, and I think we'll get it back in the next 10 years, maybe more. It was a stretch, and of course, no regrets. I mean, that was my first angel investment. I believe it was 2010 or 11, and I got liquidity in 18. So you're talking 7 or 8 years. And even that's like a pretty good turnaround for the return on that. So, until you've waited that long, none of my others have really, some have gone under and some are paying a little bit. Oh yeah, there's one I have that just does dividends. And I was rolling my eyes, but it's actually quite a bit of money. Like I get my initial investment, I get that back every year now. And it has been for several years. Yeah, it's a trip.
Yeah, that's amazing.
How many TinySeed companies have exited apart from Squadcast?
It's a good question. And I actually don't know the number offhand. I can guess it's probably like half a dozen, like 6. And some have like sold for like we got 1x our money back, like basically sold for our valuation or little, we have a 1x liquidity preference, right? So maybe they sold for less than our valuation. And then there's a few that have sold for like base hits, singles and doubles is really what we've had. It is early though. Like again, we wrote our first checks just about 4 years ago. So it's not time for exits yet. The fact that we even had some, and we've had the Squadcast exit to Descript, which is a good one.
Rob, I mean, for the people listening, obviously they're building companies. They're kind of maybe an ideal customer actually for TinySeed. I mean, give us your elevator pitch of like who you're looking for and what they need to be. I'm actually curious to hear this.
Yeah, sure. So TinySeed it's the first and I think the original is what I would say, the original startup accelerator for bootstrap SaaS. And so folks who want to stay mostly bootstrapped is the term I use, where it's like you can raise 100, 200, 300 grand and you're still mostly bootstrapped. You're not on the venture track. So we look for B2B SaaS specifically. So no B2C. And usually it's about 1K MRR up to about 40 or 50K MRR. More the better, but also growth is a factor. There's a bunch of factors we obviously take into account, founders and such. If they get above 40 or 50K, we have a syndicate, an investment syndicate that we push them to because valuations are higher there. That's really it, man. And if you go to tinyseed.com/portfolio, you'll see it's a lot of vertical, 80, 90% vertical SaaS. It's like there's one that is not just for lawn care companies, but only lawn care companies that that like do chemical treatments like that. It's like a niche within a niche, right? And we have folks who are for home improvement contractors, and those folks for medical and for whatever else. You can just read through it. Those we do have some horizontal like Squadcast, right? It was is a podcast recording software, but that's probably the sweet spot. And we offer, it's a year-long program. We invest between about 120 and usually 250 US, although we'll go a little higher. We funded somebody at 100K MRR. We went a little higher than 250, I'll admit. But usually 120 to 250 is our sweet spot, and it's accelerator type, valuations that you would see through anything else. And we focus on B2B SaaS, right? So our mentors are like, in my opinion, like some of the best B2B SaaS mentors in the world.
Judge, have you got any more questions on funding, or do you want me to?
No.
Right.
Yeah, bounce around. Sorry, I love chatting with Rob right now. This is great.
I have a question for JR about funding. So you didn't take the series, you didn't raise a Series A, is that right? Because we've had a handful. So about a third of our TinySeed companies raise subsequent funding after TinySeed. And then 2/3 don't, right? Because mostly bootstrap and they're profitable and whatever. We've had a handful, like single digits, raise Series A. And now I've seen the process because I'd never been involved before. What was your decision? What went into that decision to get all the term sheets? And it has to be like, holy crap, I'm going to make up numbers, but $6 million at a $40 million valuation. Why would I turn this down, right? It's like $6 million in cash. Like, why turn something like that down?
Yeah, one of our term sheets was like 10 on 50 or 10 on closer to 60. It was a good one. We had a few that I think, well, for starters, I've always wanted to push it as far as I can. Bootstrap's kind of where I come from, and it's kind of been, I guess, intentional to stay that way. But then it kind of got to a point where we were, I don't know, call it ego or getting flattered, or, we get these brand names where you're like, we probably should start talking to these people. And what happened is I had talked to people that had raised at the small rounds, people that had gone through the A, B, C, and all the way to a D, and then even further from there. So I had talked to a group that they'd raised 495 million, and they were like, just, you don't need it. And it doesn't mean that you can't do it again. It doesn't mean you can't raise later. Just, if you don't need it right now, don't rush into it. Just hold off. You won't regret that. You may regret raising now. And I think that last conversation kind of just pushed me over the edge. And I think, internally with the co-founders like Orman and Gilbert, they were like, do we really want to go to the spaceship yet? Is that really what we want to do? And I'm kind of where you're at, Rob, with Drip, where it's getting to a point where I understand how to scale further. I've done that, but I'm in a space, payments, I've met directly with Visa and people, I'm getting into an area that I don't even really want to deal with. It's not even that exciting. And so I've had a thought of like, well, should I sell part of this and find a strategic partner to help me get there faster and not have to worry about those things? And maybe that's not traditional VC, but maybe it's more strategic. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but I think it was just more of a philosophical, maybe. Like I just wasn't, I don't think we were ready to go that route yet.
It's good to know. Yeah. And you can always do it later, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Growth equity and these PE firms that do this stuff, very intriguing. We had one invest in a TinySeed company, and it's something I didn't even know existed. Like I don't know if it existed 6, 7, 8 years ago, but my co-founder with TinySeed is named Einar, and he's well connected to that world because he's worked in private equity and helped SaaS founders exit. There's a lot of options out there that are not just what we think about with venture capital.
What do you make of turning down that funding at that valuation, Rob?
I think it's a perfectly fine decision because you can always do it later. I struggled with Sam. We were getting funding at a much lower scale, right? With Drip, we were getting funding offers. We were getting acquisition offers. And it's like, you just have to make the choice that feels right for you. It's just take the data you have and make the best choice. So I would I don't want to run a venture funded company personally. Like an actual 10 million at a $50 million valuation. That sounds like, whoa, that's not fun anymore. I want to be able to sell it for some number that is a lot of money to a normal person and not have, VCs be able to have issues with that.
Right. Exactly.
Do you want to talk about Gumroad?
I do want to hear about Gumroad and what that was like for you. So Gumroad raised their prices. I think I referenced it earlier, but Gumroad raised their prices significantly, and the communication was just some of the worst I've seen. And I did a big tweet thread about it. And, obviously Lemon Squeezy kept getting mentioned. And I was so curious to hear what was that like on the inside?
We were looking at the numbers the other day. I think it was like what was I telling you, James? It was like 7,800% or something growth since then. I mean, it's like, and that's like, we had been launched for like maybe a year and a half at that point. So, we've drank out of our fire hydrant, I think is what it's felt like. And I think we've scaled a lot. And I think it was a bit of a coming out party maybe for us, where we were ripe. Like we had a Gumroad migration tool. We had a lot of the feature things. We had a lot of, just tools to bring people over. And it's like I don't know. It's interesting to watch it unfold. I think he's come out and done some of his numbers as well, and it looks like they are kind of having a little bit of an impact from us taking some of that on. And I think that we are playing in like the SaaS world as well. So, but just overall, it never really slowed down. We haven't had a month where we haven't stopped growing. And I was telling James on this last one that we've grown so much that on Black Friday, we processed more GMV in a single day in November this year than we did all of November last year. Wow. So it's been significant. And that's the thing, right? Is Gumroad people don't know from the early days, Gumroad was backed by Chris Sacca and some huge players.
I remember.
Lots of money thrown into that company.
Yep. And
they've been around for over a decade. And so there was, that's a significant volume that they were processing. And so to be able to scoop up a lot of that has been quite the ride.
Sounds like it. Yeah. And I know Sahil because he wrote when he got the investors to write off their investment and shrunk it down from 22 to 2 or 3. He spoke about that at MicroConf. This was years ago. Then he ramped up again and raised funding, and people were like, what? They were like early employees who were like, but my equity got wiped out and now you're raising a crowdfunding round. So it's been a journey with Gumroad for sure.
Yeah. And early on, I think we were trying to go into like the SaaS world and, to be totally transparent, we didn't want to be known as a Gumroad alternative. We actually didn't want to compete. And to be honest, in 2017, I took an entrepreneur trip, like a random one with like a group of like 20 guys. We went to Boston, and Sahil and I rode out on the plane together. So we were on the trip together. So I know him, and I have no hard feelings, nothing like that at all. Like, I actually think he's actually a pretty smart guy. And so I was actually kind of quite surprised to see the way some of that was communicated. But I think we've always taken the stance of like, competitors are going to do what they're going to do. Try not to bash them publicly or anything like that. But, at the end of the day, it was like, hey, yeah, if people want an alternative, I'm going to have to go in there and jump in. And we actually have from that, I think I have a bunch of stuff snapshotted of like what was going on and the things. I think I sent it to Harry Dry, James, with like all the different metrics that was happening. So one of these days I'll have to kind of bring all that back up and write like a blog post on it. But it's definitely like a pricing example that a lot of people could probably refer to over the years.
That was crazy. I remember the first episode we did back of this show was talking about that the great Gumroad migration, and it's just crazy. And it's been interesting to see the different stages that JR and Lemon Squeezy have been through, from holy shit, fire hydrant, got to sort everything, got to hire more people, got to try not to have everyone hate us for going through the growing pains, to then the funding, which is actually why we paused this podcast. JR was going out and doing the fundraising potentially, to now where it's, I don't know if JR you'd say it's more settled, but it's more
no, it's still it's still crazy. It's still chaotic. Because the other thing you got to remember too is the people that have come over are hundreds of thousands in MRR a month. It's not like it's, oh, this is a little, digital creator that sells, some downloads. These are people that actually have real businesses that are significant volume. And so, it's really changed, I guess, the trajectory, in addition to everything else. So obviously we get migrations from Stripe and Paddle and, things like that. But Gumroad was, that was a lot.
Good on you for surviving it.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, where that comes from is like, it leads me down this like focus. So Rob, you and James talked about, this portfolio of companies. Early on, we had Make Lemonade, and we were trying to do all these different brands, and then Lemon Squeezy has been kind of the thing that's hit. And I agree with you. I actually think if you focus, and you kind of build up this bigger thing, I actually think you're better off doing that. I think that it is exciting to think about doing those things, but at the end of the day, it's pretty difficult. And so I think that's maybe that gravity of that Gumroad experience is like really, the inertia has become so big of Lemon Squeezy that we don't have a choice anymore. Like we have to just stay focused on this thing, you know?
Yeah. And I went through a similar thing. So someone tweeted like indie hacking started in 2016 and I was like, the fuck it did. Like we didn't have the term back then, but I had like 8 or 9 software products. Mostly I had some ebooks and this and that, courses, but a lot of software, some of it downloadable, is like from 2006 to 2011. I had like 9 of them. I had like 15 contractors. I had this great lifestyle business doing 150K, 200K a year. And that was it. That's all I did. And it was fun, but it was a pain in the ass to have that many apps, and things kept breaking, and like Google would smack one and it would go down, and I really struggled to grow them. They all plateaued because they just had a single traffic source. You know, it was all this step one type businesses. And then I kind of doubled down on SaaS in 2011. I acquired a business called Hittail, and I grew that to like, what was it? It was about mid 6 figures in ARR. And I quickly realized like, it is so much easier just to focus on it. And again, that was me and 2 contractors. So it was like all bottom line money. It was the most money I'd ever had in my life. And I quickly learned like, oh, this is so much better. I enjoyed having a bunch of things because it was this ADHD creator. I get to work on all this stuff, but actual impact and like growth and money, monetary rewards, so much with Hittail, which was the 2011 one. Then about 18 months later, Hittail, it was an SEO tool and churn was relatively high, and just it's in a space where there was a lot of competition, and I wasn't able to get churn down. I don't know if I ever could have without really changing the product. So then we launched Drip, and I was like, oh, I'm going to keep Hittail. I use Hittail to fund all the development of Drip, and I'm going to keep Hittail forever, blah, blah, blah. And pretty soon I was so Drip took off, to your point, like Lemon Squeezy. Drip took off and it's doing millions. And I'm like, what is this little business over here that's a pain in the ass? So then I sold that. Like that was a nice, like a 6-figure exit, mid 6-figure. So I went through the same thing, maybe at a different scale, but I've seen other people do this and think that like, oh, this big portfolio of things, it's fun. It's cool. It scratches a maker itch. But I think focus is, and with TinySeed companies, like if someone comes to get funded, we have made an offer to someone and found out that they had kind of these not just side projects, not hobbies, but like a side business that is also a business. And we are like, you have to sell that, shut it down, or we're not going to fund you. That's how much I believe, Einar and I believe in focus.
I'm with Rob. I think he's nailed it. I'm speaking from my own, Mojo is the same and Lemon Squeezy is now the same. It's just the way it works.
So is it different that within Lemon Squeezy you have almost these standalone SaaS products like the marketplace, like the affiliate feature? Is that a different thing, Rob?
Yeah, because it's just one company. I mean, think about what I'm saying. Like, startups for the rest of us, and MicroConf YouTube channel, and MicroConf, and TinySeed. I mean, I own 2-3 corporate entities, whatever you want to say. Aren't I unfocused? No, it's all one thing. It's a community of people, and they need different products, right? Some of them really need free education. Some of them need mastermind matching, which we offer. Some of them need funding, which TinySeed offers. It's all one thing now. And that's how at least the way I don't know Lemon Squeezy well enough, but it sounds like it's all one thing, even though it's different product offerings. Yeah. Think of like HubSpot and Intercom and Salesforce. It's not one product, but they are capturing more of the market by having multiple things. They're still focused. When I say not focused, it's like, I'm going to launch this and that, and then totally unrelated, or, they don't feed into each other, right?
And with the other products in the Make Lemonade portfolio, JR, what's happening with those? Are they sort of self-sustaining and they're just going to sort of exist?
Yeah, one of them's like Norman has his things like Dunked, and, we built Iconic with James McDonald, which is an icon set that Shopify used in their redesign. And, I think James tweeted the other day is about to hit $100,000 in selling icons in the last year, which is crazy. And there's subscription revenue to it, but it's definitely just kind of sits there and operates on its own. That's not like a SaaS business. It's not. And maybe to Rob's point, it's not like we're over here with lawn maintenance people and then we're over here trying to build this thing over here, right? Like they're kind of connected a little bit. They build an email list that feeds the rest of what we do, which kind of helps expose us to other designers and then developers. And, so there's a little bit of that, but I'm really trying to avoid that because from what I'm picking up from you, Rob, when I get too operatey, I don't even know if that's a word. I get bored, right? And I start to shut down a little bit. I need to kind of be in and out and moving and being creative, I guess, to kind of keep my interest. So
I could see it. Yeah. I think a lot of us are made that way.
Rob, you've been vocal about not bootstrapping a two-sided marketplace, but this is where JR comes from. This is his bread and butter, and they're now doing it with Lemon Squeezy. The product is going to have this marketplace launching early next year. Is JR mad for doing this, or because he's got the chops and they've already started building one side of it, it kind of makes sense to do?
That's the key. So the actual quote, if you hear me ever say it on my podcast, people quote the first part of it. Like, you hear money is the root of all evil, and they say the Bible says that. You know what it actually says? The love of money is the root of all evil. People just forget the love. So my quote is not, don't bootstrap a two-sided marketplace. It's, don't bootstrap a two-sided marketplace unless you already have access to at least one side. That's it. So TinySeed is a two-sided marketplace. You don't think of it, but guess what we needed to do? We needed to raise $40 million. That's a lot of investors, people with money. Then we also needed to find founders who would take our money. It's two sides. Why would I be crazy enough? And we didn't bootstrap it per se, although the first round was pretty bootstrapped. I didn't take any salary, and we were like grinding, trying to do it. Why did I do that? Because we had access to both sides, frankly, through the MicroConf audience. So it sounds to me, my guess is that JR and Lemon Squeezy have access to at least one side. In addition, when I say bootstrap, I really do mean like, I'm a person in my bedroom and I have $5,000. Like JR and Lemon Squeezy have more resource. They're at the point where they're self-funding it. You know what I mean? There's a difference. Like Drip cost about 150 to 200 grand to build before we got to break even. I didn't raise funding. I bootstrapped it technically by self-funding it off a different product, that SaaS I told you about before. That's how I did it. And I get the feeling that that's what you're doing. Is that right?
Yeah. And what's funny is when I read it and I listen to what you're saying, when I built Mojo back in the day, I always told myself when I sold that, I said, I will never fucking do that again. It was the worst thing. It's like, I actually agree with what Rob's saying because it's the hardest business model to do. It's the chicken or the egg problem. It's such a conundrum. And I'm a walking contradiction, basically, is what I'm trying to say. But doing it again because of the fact that we do have all this content and all these quote unquote sellers, merchants that have these products. And it's also been a major feature request. So there's a lot of pent up demand for it. So yeah, we're ticking a lot of those boxes. And so I think that's why this one makes sense.
It feels like it does.
It's a moat too. It's a moat for us.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the other side of the coin is if you can do it, it becomes a moat. So Dan and Ian with Tropical MBA podcast bootstrapped a job board. A lot for digital nomads, but frankly, it's for anybody now. It's dynamitejobs.com. But what did they have? They had access. They frankly had access to both sides because they have a very popular podcast called Tropical MBA. And so people were saying, but Rob said not to bootstrap it, and it's like, no, I didn't really. I think at a certain point, the big issue I have with it too is I get so many questions on my podcast, Startups for the Rest of Us, about people with no entrepreneurial experience, with really no money, who are trying to bootstrap a two-sided marketplace. And that's where I say, you need to not. Just don't. I don't know why everybody thinks they need to be Uber for X or Matchup 2. Feels like it's easier because I don't have to build a product, or really work hard. It's like I don't have to build a bunch of SaaS. I don't know what the draw is for early stage entrepreneurs to do that, but it's kind of painful. And I've actually jokingly said, but kind of intentionally, I no longer answer questions about two-sided marketplaces. I read them and I say, don't, and then I move on to the next one.
Well, I was speaking to JR on the last episode we recorded, saying, are you actually looking forward to the marketplace in this instance with the learnings from Mojo? And he's like, yeah, I kind of am. Because it's approaching it with one side already built. And JR, you know this stuff, right? And you get to approach it from a different angle.
Yeah.
Okay. Final question, or final thing I want to ask you, Rob. We've spoken about the insides of Lemon Squeezy, what's going on, the scale. JR really needs someone to help him with operations. If Lemon Squeezy was in a TinySeed cohort and you were advising the founders of what to do next year, what kind of things would you say?
That's a good question. I don't know enough about the business to go too in depth, but honestly, the operations thing I said earlier is number one on my radar, that I start telling founders usually as they're approaching 10 employees, and we have a handful who've hit that. The other thing that I think about, well, there's two things. Someone just asked me this question like last month, like a TinySeed founder who's kind of in a similar boat. And I said, hire operations if you can. Second thing I said, one of the things that stung us at Drip, technical scaling. I didn't realize how hard that would be. And we hit a point where we just kept upping our AWS instances and we outran it and we added more workers. And then eventually the database was a bottleneck and there wasn't a bigger instance. And we were paying $8,000 a month, or maybe $10,000 a month just for the database on AWS is the biggest one you could possibly do. And we were locking up and having queues to send emails of like 2 hours. When you get to that point, it's 4 months, 6 months of multiple engineers to rewrite the entire, you have to pull it out of a relational database. You have to do a bunch of stuff I won't go into here. I didn't realize, like I'm a developer, but I'd never run something at that scale. Hundreds of millions of emails a month, hundreds of millions of events a month, and it nailed us. So I wished I had gotten ahead of that. Not every app has it. Marketing automation is very complicated and very processor intensive, but stuff has to move and delays are a real problem. So I wished I had not only had I thought of it, but like that I had hired someone who could focus on that earlier.
Yeah.
Before it came to bite us, because once it bit us, we were having these 2-hour-long delays. It was 6 months to fix it. And that sucks every day to wake up to this massive backup in your queue. And I think the third thing I start talking to founders about is if you haven't raised additional money or you haven't thought about what your ultimate exit strategy might be, start thinking about that. You don't have to do it next year, but everybody sells and some people raise more money. And the more prepared you are mentally for that might be 6 months down the line. It might be 2-3 years. You still got to start thinking strategically about it.
So operations, technical scaling, and think about exit plan.
Exit and funding if you're going to do that. Yeah. And there's obviously more specifics. Like if we actually sat down for an hour, Jared could tell me like, here's the biggest problem. Because that's my first question. Like, what's the biggest bottleneck? What's the biggest problem in the business? Do you need more leads or do you need more sales or whatever, right? That's what we would troubleshoot. But without any additional context, like making it kind of generic, those are the things that I see coming up a lot. And also raise your prices. That's the other, one of the biggest things. It is, at least half the companies that start TinySeed, like they're underpriced and they raise their prices in the first few months.
Oh, that's cool. Right. No AI wrapper that they should introduce.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, that was my other piece of advice. Launch an AI wrapper. As a side project, two-sided marketplace, B2C, and bootstrapping. Yep. And charge a one-time fee for it, because that's the new SaaS. New SaaS is one-time fee. Yeah, that's where it's going. Nice. The puck is going, JR.
That's amazing. James, I feel bad keeping Rob. Should we wrap up on these listener questions, or do you want to...
I've got 3 of the listener questions that came in. I think one of which is a bit we could go, it was about failures and we could talk about that forever. One question is quite a short one, which I like. Would Rob invest in Lemon Squeezy today and why?
Oh, interesting. Me personally, so it's not B2B SaaS. Yeah. SaaS is subscription. So TinySeed would not, because that's not in its charter. Would I personally? Probably. It would really depend on the valuation. I don't, 60 million, no. Like I don't invest at anything above, well, I won't say a blanket valuation, but I don't invest at Silicon Valley multiples. It just has never made sense to me given the checks that I personally write. If I'm writing a $25,000, $50,000 check tops, I don't want to own 0.001% of a company. So yes, I like the company. It would just, it would just depend.
And then the other one was less a question, more suggestions for your podcast episode 700, because you were asking for some. Have you got thoughts on what you're going to do for your 700 episodes, Rob?
No, and the problem is I've already done 6 100 episodes. And so I've done all the things.
What were they for the previous ones?
We had a bunch of people like Andrew Warner, Dan and Ian, I don't know, whoever else you could think of. We emailed them and said, can you record a 30 to 60 second audio clip about what you like about or whatever, something. And we did that. We had our wives come on and do a show without us. That was episode 200. We have just reminisced of like, it's 300. Let's talk about what it's like to ship every week for, at that time, 6 years, what that's like, and consistency. We talked about numbers and growth and this and that. So that's kind of a reflection episode. That's the kind of stuff we've done. And at 600 was just me talking. I'm solo now. I had a co-host, in the early days, but 600 was me talking about the Beatles and playing some pieces of Strawberry Fields Forever and talking about creativity. And then at the end, I didn't even say it was episode 600. At the very end, I was just like, by the way, this episode has 2 extra zeros. I don't know that it even matters. This is Rob Walling signing off from episode 600 of Startup for the Rest of Us. And it was just funny. It was like I didn't do anything special, but it's one of my favorite episodes of the show. So
I've got an idea. So it's 700. my mind goes to number 7, lucky number 7. Entrepreneurship, they talk about, there's a little bit of luck involved. So you could actually do something interesting about it. When I say luck, right, it's like 10 years of luck. And so maybe it's, talking or bringing somebody on that's had some luck, or something to do with luck and entrepreneurship, or over the years, like, oh yeah, he's so lucky that he sold that. It's like, no, he's actually not. He actually worked his ass off. And I think something around that could actually be intriguing if you could find examples or companies or guests or something that, kind of had that luck. So
yeah, I like that. I have this paradigm or this framework where I say, I believe success comes down to 3 things: hard work, luck, and skill in varying degrees. And some entrepreneurs I know, I do know one person of all the entrepreneurs I know who sold his company for 8 figures, who he tells me himself, I got so fucking lucky. I totally lucked into this. Right place, right time, didn't actually work that hard, did it. Almost everybody else I know is like hard work and skill, developing your skills and all that. So that would be an easy thing for me to talk about for a while.
How old are your kids?
2 kids, 13 and 17.
Have they ever interviewed you?
No, but I have interviewed both of them. They've both been on the podcast at different times, but yeah, they haven't interviewed me though.
I'd be interested to hear what questions they would ask you.
That is a good idea. Huh. I'm writing all these down.
Rob, you're awesome. Thanks for everything you've done for the indie entrepreneur startup community over the years. But yeah, it's been awesome talking to you, get to know you and catch up, and hopefully we'll stay in touch. So thanks again for coming on, taking the time.
Thank you guys. Yeah, it means a lot.
Okay, all right.